All right, quick test here for me, Hannah, and anybody else that is here. Let's do a quick test in the chat as well as the audio and the screen. I have a chat window on my screen, but I want to make sure you don't see my chat. You see the full image here on my slides, as well as you can hear me. So if you see all that, let me know in the chat. But I can hear you, cannot see any chat. Excellent, excellent. Can hear, see the presentation, getting a lot of thumbs up. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. And welcome, everybody, to an exciting STEM Wednesday, a topic near and dear to my heart as someone who grew up participating in science fairs, as a teacher who facilitated many a science fair. Great, great, great topic here. And as Hannah has reminded everybody, if you're using the chat, make sure to change it to everyone so that everyone can see your lovely comments. We're going to have a couple of questions and things for you today. And actually, let's just jump right into it. Our first audience question is about science fair projects. And I want you to think about science fair projects that either you have done or you have seen yourself. And I want you to tell me about a time when there was a science fair project that was very memorable. And again, this could be your own experiment that you've done, one that you've seen. It could even just be some sort of crazy science fair experiment you've seen on a show like Mythbusters. So let's go ahead and fill that chat with some ideas and memorable science fair projects. And as you're doing that, one that just completely stands out to me was one where my dad and I would go golfing all the time, and we wanted to know which golf ball was the most durable for the best price. And it was, I remember every little detail to this day of all of the hands-on pieces of, we built the golf ball launcher. We put golf balls in blenders to test out how durable, and they would be flying around. And I will never forget, we were testing out a golf ball in a blender and to, again, test the durability. And as it was spinning, winding up, it shot through the blender. It broke through the plastic and embedded into the wall, our drywall, and made a hole and a divot. And we figured that was a great way to also simulate some durabilities. It was fantastic. Okay, and let's go to the chat here. We have we got someone saying they're very impressed with some high schoolers designing an app to help identify skin cancer using AI and image recognition. Wow, love that idea. You know, I feel like we hear a lot of fear about AI, and this is a great example showing how students took AI and used it to work on something that was important. Love that. We have another one. Which SPF is better from which brand? And project used photo paper and I'm glad that project used photo paper and UV rays rather than telling students and people go stand out in the sun for 3 hours. So that's fantastic that you use the photo paper. And then we also see another project was someone saw that they were recently looking at redesigning dams to help with the water runoff. Awesome. Really great idea. And as we're thinking about these science fair projects, and these ones came to your minds, let's think about what made them memorable. Was it the data that you got at the end? Was it the experiences itself? Was it the curiosity that sparked the project? There's a lot of ways that we can look at these experiments that make them memorable. Now, before we get into anything today, let's talk about what today's STEM Wednesday is not going to be. This is not going to just be a breakdown of the scientific method. The scientific method is pretty much standard wherever you go. We know these steps. We know making an observation, asking questions. We know that. It's more about what drives this scientific method, what makes it that memorable experience, what makes it that experience that will instill that desire to continue further down the road. And also, how do we make it more practical for students where they're not just doing an experiment to get a grade, they actually want to discover and understand the world around them. And then also discovering how we can bring these science fair projects to life. I already saw some great examples in the chat, so love that. And then, of course, how to incorporate technology. And specifically today, we'll be talking about 3D printers and Labdiscs for any sort of lab sensing equipment, right? Lab sensors. So the 4 steps we're going to talk about today are going to kind of revolve around an image you see right here. The first step we're going to talk about today is what we can do to inspire that curiosity with exploration. So I got some really fun ideas, some things you could start today, or if you've already done your science fair, if you're thinking about ideas for next year, definitely look at ways to incorporate these suggestions. The next is a very important strategy and probably one of the most important and often overlooked. I feel like we rush through this process. This step is the brainstorming session. And then, of course, incorporating that technology. And then finally, giving students the opportunity to present and reflect. So those will be the 4 things we will cover in our very quick Learning Lab sessions. If you've joined these Learning Lab sessions before, they go super fast, but I'm glad to have, we got some people in the audience here. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Hannah. Anybody else, Luann, so anybody else in the chat, please, let's keep it going. So step 1, inspiring curiosity with exploration. And I want to go back to what I mentioned before, as so much of what we do as educators comes down to how we introduce a topic, an idea, a project. And one of the worst things we could do as educators is essentially use the idea of a letter grade as the motivation for the project, right? Like so often I find this pitfall of educators talking about how, okay, in 3rd trimester, your entire science grade is going to be your science fair project. Right then and there, the motivation for the students is now to get a good grade rather than to understand the world around them and to just be curious and to explore. So to help combat that, my suggestion before you even start a science fair project is to have opportunities for students to explore and engage with the world around them. So one idea is to do a nature walk, is to allow students to go on a walking field trip. And it could just be walking around your school. I remember one of the schools that I taught at, we had a golf cart that either the custodians or the office staff would use. And one day I took my class, we all stood around this golf cart for probably 20 minutes. And we just asked questions. They asked about how it goes. They asked about, does it use gasoline? They asked about the tires. And we spent a very long time with looking at one thing. So those nature walks can be a great way to inspire curiosity and exploration. Now, journaling is often thought about only specific to language arts, English, where you're writing a narrative or you're writing poetry, and we miss the opportunity to build those skills months and months and months before a science fair project starts. Giving students opportunity to journal and to just write their questions, to write what they wonder about, cannot be overstated as a huge step into preparing your students for those memorable experiences. And if you don't have the ability to go out on a nature walk, here are a few ways that you can do a virtual exploration. As a kid, I loved the encyclopedia. I would think of a word, I would look it up, and then what it would do is it would trigger this curiosity, because I would look on the next page over and I would see a word that I never anticipated looking up. I never would have come across that word if I didn't allow my curiosity to just take over. That doesn't happen as much with a virtual world. And so you can create virtual opportunities for exploration. So let's actually try this together. I used AI. Speaking of AI, we had a project was talking about using AI for image recognition. I made this image in AI, and I want you in the chat to just start a sentence with, I wonder, or what is blank? And just let me know in the chat some things that you are curious about with this image you see right here. There's no wrong answer. There's no right answer. It's just, what are you curious about? And if you're watching this recording, you obviously can look at this image and wonder to yourself, what is going on in this picture? And sometimes when you get pictures from AI, we could spend a long time looking at the pictures. The thing that stands out to me is I see some lightning in the background. I see like waves and everything. Okay, we got a question. Okay, we got a couple here. Wonder how thin the dragon's wings are and if they're too thin for flight. Oh my gosh, Kate, your question right there, your wonder right there could drive, my mind is racing with all the types of science experiments we could do down the road. We're talking airfoil. We're talking how dragons were thought to be real when we've explored bones of aquatic creatures. Like there's so many things that come to mind with your question, Kate, love it. And then Hannah says, wonder if the balls in the air are spores. from the plants on the right. And then now we're talking spores. What are spores? How do they generate? How do they move around the world? How does wind affect spores? You see, like just this one image, we got so many ideas flowing. Another great place for students to have a virtual space for exploration is using My STEM Kits. Hannah's going to put a link in the chat for us for My STEM Kits if you don't have an account. And if you do have an account, one of the things that I would love you to try on My STEM Kits next time you're with your students is disregard whatever grade level content you are in charge of. That's another pitfall that we find in science fair projects is we try to gear the content towards the grade level. And we should allow students' curiosities to take over. If you have a second grader and you're walking them through My STEM Kits and the second grader goes, look at all those colorful lines, and you open it, there's no reason a second grader couldn't explore what DNA is. Obviously, we're going to change things to be at more grade level appropriate, but My STEM Kits is a fantastic resource for virtual exploration to spark curiosity. All right. And then another wonder here is the water dragon related to the air dragon? Then we could talk about evolution. Yes, yes, yes. Awesome. Okay. Step 2, the brainstorming and idea selection. This stage right here, I feel like is where science teachers are banging their head against the wall the most, because I feel like we just have this, we want to say, just pick one, pick an idea. And what I find is that it's sort of this day where, okay, today, boys and girls, you're going to pick your idea. And that pressure puts students in this fight or flight mode where they really are going to make a decision to make their teacher happy or to get a grade. So we need to let go of this idea that we need to select an idea and give students the space and the time to generate their ideas, and giving them a space to let their ideas live, whether that's virtual through a Google Classroom or Google Docs space, or even classic, just big butcher paper, writing your ideas out, and let them simmer. There's a reason why jambalaya is so good. It's because you let it simmer for so long. Let these ideas simmer and give students the opportunity to explore all these ideas. And if at the end there's a point where students are unable to select an idea, I would recommend having a list of 20 ideas, have them roll a dice, and whatever number it lands on, that's the project they pick. And there are some students who need that support. They have struggled with decisions. But this idea of forcing students to pick something out by a certain date can be really stressful. Give time for curiosity. Give time for those ideas to simmer. Now, let's say your students got their idea. Where does technology fit? Specifically, if you have a 3D printer or a Labdisc. Yes, Hannah, I agree. That roommate, I would love to have a classroom like that. So in order to bring ideas to life with technology, some ideas with 3D designing and printing, and this is just scratching the surface because we could spend hours talking about how 3D printers could be used for science fair projects. One simple thing is to allow students to recreate the world around them. So if they're just designing the solar system or parts of a plant, that's totally fine. But then they can have the opportunity to create simple machines that they are able to test. You know, we have designs for catapults, but if a student wanted to design their own catapult, that's going to be a great way for them to do the designing process and the printing process. If they're using the Labdisc to understand the world around them, some ideas is just thinking about how those sensors work and just changing certain variables. How does sound change? How does heat change? How does air pressure change the things in our environment? Those sensors allow the data to tell a story. And that's where, like, that's the bread and butter, right? It's the story that drives everything. Why were you curious in the first place? Well, I liked playing golf with my dad. And then there's these stories of the golf ball flew out into the wall, and that made it memorable. We got another comment here. The student that was working on the dam redesign project made it out of cardboard and was testing it by rerouting the river to a side channel. Would have loved to have seen what she could have done with a 3D printer. Would have been more water resistant and structural. Very, very cool. And I feel like the most important step is this final idea, and that is simply allowing students to present and talk about their experience and their experiment. And we like the idea of the classic science fair project, right? You got the poster board, you got the data, you got the catchy title. But what often happens in a giant room full of science fair projects? You kind of just walk around and you look at, oh, that's nice, that's nice. And there's not a lot of interaction. And so giving students the chance to present as well as having a back and forth question and answering is going to be crucial. And some tips for this idea for presenting and reflecting. First is reach out to your local colleges. There are many opportunities for students as well as professors to allow students to come to a school, listen to students talk about their science fair project for credit. You can also work with neighboring schools. When I taught sixth grade, we worked with the local high school that was right down the street, and we arranged walking field trips for the high school students to come visit my classroom. And the students were paired up, and my students got the opportunity to talk about their project as well as talk about what went wrong and then ask questions afterwards. And I would always, I told students, I said, I got this trick from a lawyer. If you want to be really good at presenting information, this is what lawyers do. You tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. That skill is so important in life. And yet, so often I see science fair projects where you just have students that are just standing there in front of this poster board and there's no interaction. There's no understanding from the student's end of what they actually did, other than I made a beautiful board and I hope I get a good grade. So allowing students to have a back and forth, as well as virtual presentations. There's many amazing resources like Flipgrid, Padlet, even just giving students the opportunity to record themselves and talk about their project is important, as well as having community outreach nights where you can have projects set up and having families come. It could be like a back to school night, could be an open house and things like that. Now let's talk about resources. Resources, we got an idea here. Mini science fair within the class. Have half the students go around and practice asking questions while the other half practices answering. And then you switch. Oh, great idea. And I've also seen a lot of schools where they'll do what are called like buddy classes, where you might be partnered up, where a sixth grade class might be partnered with a first grade class. Have the first graders show up, because then the first graders get opportunities to ask scientific questions, and the sixth graders get the opportunity to support their science project with evidence, data, observations. And I love this idea too of then switching. Imagine if a class of sixth graders went to a class of first graders and got to ask the first graders their thoughts or understanding of a project that the first graders did. It's not limited by age, right? Okay, resources. These are great resources. I hope you use any and all of them. That first one being my STEM kits. That's me. Let's go to my STEM kits. Now, Hannah, you're going to have to help me with pronunciation here. I don't know how to pronounce this PFET. I don't know if you say it FET or PET or just PHET. But one of our latest additions on my STEM kits are these simulations where students can essentially do exactly what you see here. We can explore gas law, kinetic molecular theory, diffusion. Over here, we can look at an area builder and explore how area works. So if you go to my STEM Kids, a lot of great resources for design challenges where students are doing a design themselves, even just getting ideas or looking at those simulations. The other resource, again, are local colleges, talking to local colleges, even having members of your community come to your classroom to speak to that process. Having a city designer come to your class and talk about their process, allow for a back and forth, allow for questions. And there are so many people that are out there willing to share their knowledge, their information. It just takes a quick email. Partnering with local schools. And then Tinkercad. Tinkercad has been absolutely fabulous in adding resources. Specifically, I'm going to zoom in here so we can see. If you go into Tinkercad, you already have an account, free to use, you log in, it's not just 3D designing anymore. There are opportunities for circuits. And if you have not yet seen the sim labs are an amazing way to get your students thinking about the world around them in a virtual space fueled by 3D designing and 3D printing. So as we look through these sims, we can look at how gravity is simulated in a 3D environment. Students can do an entire model doing 3D designing without even having to print. Then they design it, you can print it if you have the resources. I like this one of building simple machines. Students could build all of these things you're seeing on my screen right now. And that could be in the exploration phase, that could be in the actual experimenting phase themselves. If they want to 3D print the designs they make, I would say go for it. And then the last resource would be Thingiverse. And Thingiverse is a free to use website that is a collection of designs that other people have made. And the way that I would use Thingiverse, hold on, let me go. Oh, Fet, I just saw the comment. Thank you, Hannah. Thingiverse may not always have student appropriate content. So you might want to specify and click on things ahead of time. But by simply pulling up this is a print in place whale shark. This could start the conversation of how does this design function so that it prints in one piece and yet it has these interlocking pieces that articulate, and that could spark a student's curiosity to design something, to explore something else, to think about how our bones work in our bodies. And just by giving students those spaces to explore is huge. All right, we are wrapping up. It is just 3:20 or 3:21 my time. We're wrapping up our time here with our STEM Wednesday About Learning Lab Science Fair. As we've gone through all of these ideas, suggestions, tips, what idea do you see being most helpful or something you want to try at your next science fair? It could be something you're going to do this year, or if your science fair has already taken place, but now you've got some ideas for next year, what are some things you want to try to bring that science fair to life, to make it memorable? We have the low-key nature walk. Oh, I feel like we can't get enough of nature. All right, as you're finishing up those comments, stay tuned for next week. We want to see you next week because I don't know if you've heard, I'm sure you have, there is a major eclipse coming up. And this eclipse, do not let this opportunity go by without engaging your students in more hands-on learning opportunities. One thing you can check out right now, and if you're watching the recording, we'll definitely have that link in the description. Please go to My STEM Kits and check out our brand new Eclipse Shadow Kit. If you go to Browse Kits on the left-hand side, our newest STEM kits are here, and there it is, Eclipse Shadows Kit. And this is going to allow students to replicate how that solar eclipse affects shadows. It's hands-on, it can get a little messy, but it's gonna be a lot of fun. And if you join us next week, we also have a special STEM Wednesday from Jonathan Lockwood, who is going to be talking to us about how you can explore the eclipse using your Labdisc to really experience that upcoming eclipse. Again, think about data. That data tells a story. When we use the sensors and we look at the numbers, what do those numbers mean? It's hands-on, it's memorable, it's important, it's real life, it stems from, that's my STEM joke for you, it stems from curiosity. And we just hope to see you there. And we hope that these ideas spark that curiosity within your students, give you ideas to get going, and to help students not do a science fair project to get the letter grade, but to do it to inspire the next generation of scientists, to have students who want to learn about the world around them. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us today. It was great to have that participation in the chat. Loved the ideas, loved the suggestions. Thank you for all of the things you want to try. And we hope to see you at our next STEM Wednesday to learn about the eclipse and lab discs. Thanks, folks, and we'll see you later.